Moving on then to item 5, which is an update report around complaints and conduct, and again just by way of introduction and background. You will be aware that I asked for a review of the complaints within this office back in 2014. That was called the Crawford Review, and it was mainly looking at the introduction of early resolution approaches to police complaints and service recovery teams. And I know the report really goes into detail on that, and obviously the introduction of a service recovery approach on February 2016 has clearly had a big impact in terms of the way complaints are now being recorded and dealt with. And the wider context is that the Police and Crime Bill, which is still due to be enacted in 2018, as we understand it, of course we've had the election and things are a little bit more uncertain, but we assume this is still going to go forward, and we are, as you know, work is underway not only through the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners but through my office to look at how we handle the potential changes around complaints locally. So with that, I'll hand over to report on the complaint update. Thanks.
Okay, so this is a very, very regularised report that we have been doing ever since we started the COM process. So hopefully, if anybody is viewing the footage, that they will be able to backtrack and look at previous reports.
Yeah.
I see that what's in front of you today as being quite a helpful success story about what now happens if somebody is dealt with here and now in 2017, and what the early service recovery and the early investigation process will do for members of the public. What you can see is that the overall number of allegations, particularly over the last 3 months, are starting to drop. And that's for 2 reasons. One is, I think, is because we have reintroduced the recording practice following IPCC guidelines. If we can deal with something, the phrase is then and there, within 10 days from the incident happening or the allegation or the conduct happening to final resolution with the satisfaction of the complainant, then we no longer need to formally record that under these statistics. It doesn't mean to say that we don't still record what we've done, and indeed if we need to revisit it, that we can do. So I think that will have had a little bit of an impact. But overall, the service recovery teams now have been operating for over 12 months, and I see that the vast majority of complaints now, I think it's something like 60, I've got the figure somewhere, 67 complaints, so all these complaints are now being finalised, which is actually higher than the national average, which says something is really working here, and that complainants are actually getting their issues resolved swiftly and appropriately. And there are a number of other forces looking to see what it is that we're doing. HMIC, as you know, had a look at our complaints process as part of their recent appeal inspection and saw some really good practice. So I'm hoping that when we get the final report that we'll be getting some helpful feedback around how they found our complaints process. But certainly the hot debrief suggested that they saw a lot of good practice rather than anything that they were particularly concerned about. I think rather than sort of ploughing my way through all of the statistics, you've made reference to the Police and Crime Bill.
Yeah.
We'll continue to do the work to see what the best way forward is in terms of the recommendations and complaints. But I do think that we've got a really good platform to build upon from. The IPCC referrals that are mentioned in the report, again, as you can see, the number of referrals has decreased, not by a significant amount, but it's decreased over the last 12 months to 144 in comparison to 161. But we have seen an increase in the number of independent investigations. That's very much about IPCC practice, particularly around concerns for missing from home inquiries and also road traffic collisions. We are seeing some increases in those that are becoming independent investigations. And as you're aware, we've got 22 live independent investigations currently and 1 supervised, which I know that you've been briefed about. In terms of conduct, an awful lot of work now ongoing to try and raise awareness of issues, good practice. I know that you may well be interested in what are some of the initiatives that we're doing. I can talk you through those. When we get onto the final page, page 6 of the executive summary, it does actually outline where we are in terms of the numbers of cases and the numbers in particular of suspended and restricted officers and staff. And as you know, I've taken a very pragmatic decision to say I would rather be getting value for money from officers and staff if we can, retaining them in the workplace while those investigations are taking place, so that we're actually getting good value for money at the public purse, rather than people sitting at home feeling disconnected from the organisation and indeed not contributing to the overall effort. So currently we only actually have 9 police officers suspended and 5 police staff members suspended, which is a much better place than we have seen. We make sure that the duties that they're carrying out are appropriate given the nature of some of those complaints. And then finally, we have had in the last 12 months 14 misconduct hearings involving 16 police officers, and as a result of these hearings 12 officers have been dismissed without notice, 3 have received final written warnings, and the charges were not proved against 1 officer. So again, in terms of trying to reassure the public that we take complaints incredibly seriously, we have had a number of officers and indeed staff who have been dismissed from the organisation as no longer being suitable to work for West Yorkshire Police.
Okay, thank you for that overview of the report. There's a couple of questions. Regarding the service recovery teams, are they now fully resourced and operational, and what further impact is that likely to have, do you think, in terms of complaint handling?
So when we first started, as you know, it was 1 inspector, 2 sergeants and 16 PCs. We took a little bit of time to be able to staff ourselves up and make sure that we selected people who were really interested in this particular subject, and we actually had some resolution to do about people who'd worked in other parts of the organisation and whether or not they could fulfil these roles. We are now, as of yesterday, the last member of staff has joined the team. So bearing in mind that they've been up and running since February 2016 when we first started this, we've got a bit of a mix of experienced and inexperienced staff. That's actually quite helpful because then the newer members of the team can be appropriately mentored and guided through the various parts of the process. So I think what we will now find is that process, that methodology really starts to kick in terms of being able to deal with complaints in a really timely fashion, which I think that tends to be the sort of common theme. Having said that, Commissioner, I do recognise that we do have a number of legacy cases between both your office and indeed mine, where we have got some members of the public who are still dissatisfied with West Yorkshire Police and what we have done, but they tend to be older cases rather than newer ones. Okay, and
Again, I think it's touched on within the wider report, but it's what steps have the force taken to deal with the conduct issues associated with officers, for example, committing criminal offences or perverting the course of justice?
Right, so what we're trying to do now is to really bring home to officers and staff the expected standards of behaviour. It's a very timely opportunity for us to do this, given the numbers of new people coming into the organisation. So first and foremost, the PSD department have developed an engagement strategy, and we're talking about engagement in a positive sense, because surely we want our officers and staff to recognise the benefits of appropriate behaviour within the workplace. We've got direct training inputs, particularly with all of our new student officers, new PCSOs, new people coming into the organisation, where members of the PSD team go and explain all about our core values and what the Code of Ethics is all about, and then link that to unacceptable behaviour and what we are not prepared to tolerate or accept. We have meet and greet days at Cargate. I think you've probably seen where we have the support staff networks and indeed a stall from PSD, taking the time to explain to anybody who's at the training centre what people can do, what the services can be, what early recovery and so on looks like. We take part in national campaigns, we publish a newsletter, we actually now have our own PSD Twitter account which talks about, flags up issues, concerns and directs people to perhaps other sources of information about what's acceptable, what isn't. External input, so our PSD teams now go and actually engage with, for example, a forum that might be discussing domestic abuse to get a sense from victims themselves about how they feel that the police are behaving and what learning we can take back into the organisation. We talk to 16 to 17-year-olds at the Explorers and Cadets. We have what we're calling district health checks, where we go in and visit district commanders on a sort of quarterly basis, or indeed members of their command team, and talk through any trends, any issues, any concerns where we might be experiencing a blip of activity for a particular reason around a particular type of conduct. We always publicise now and publish the outcomes of those misconduct hearings so that people will, across the organisation and indeed the public, have some recognition and confidence about the fact that these matters are dealt with very, very seriously. And we produce a quarterly strategic threat assessment based very, very much on the same process and thinking as we do for our criminal activity around strategic threat assessments, to try and identify those key areas where we've got the greatest concern. That could be, for example, about misuse of information, it could be about inappropriate conduct, it could be about use of force. More recently, what we're trying to do now is think about what's next. So blogs, screens in some of our PFI buildings, getting into some of the briefings themselves where possible, open days again where members of staff could actually come in and talk directly to PSD teams. So we really are trying to make sure that we are touching every base that we can think of so that people's awareness is raised. But I think the fact that we talk about values and the code of ethics being at the heart of everything that we are doing, I think that message is very definitely landing. The big national campaign that we are now supporting, of course, is the inappropriate approaches that officers are making around sexual misconduct. So the Deputy, only last week, has recorded a new video piece that again is going to go out across the whole of the force to support that particular campaign, because sadly we have had one or two cases, as you're aware of, here in West Yorkshire, to try and remind all of our people about the appropriateness of forming relationships outside of the workplace with people that you have met through work.
Yeah. No, thank you for that comprehensive update on that particular aspect, and that is reassuring to hear, so thank you for that.